Okay, you guys, I'm going to teach through this lesson so that you can watch it as many times as you need to. Go back through. I'm going to kind of ask questions as I go, but essentially I'm going to show you what to do in this lesson. So given a square with side length of A, we should all be on page 29 of your notes. If you haven't figured that out, feel free to pause this video at any point so that you can get caught up, but page 29 of your notes. A square with a side length of A. So in a square, we know that we have right angles. So these are all 90 degrees. Okay, all exactly the same. And we know that all sides are the same, and it says side length of A. So this is A units long, A units long, A units long, and A units long. This is very similar to our last lesson. I want to make a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So if I look down here, the special right triangle we're talking about today is a 45, 45, 90. So how do I make a 45, 45, 90 out of this? And I'm going to make two of them as I split it down diagonally. So this is 45, 45, 45, and 45 if you do a good job splitting it, which mine's not perfect, but you get the general idea. So we're going to pay attention to one of these 45, 45, 90. So I'll go ahead and go with this one that's down here. We're not paying attention to both of them. And we want to know what this length is because we already have this side is A, and we need to know what this side is. So you do it through Pythagorean Theorem, A squared plus B squared equal to C squared. Okay, A and B are these two sides, so they both happen to be A. So we're going to say A squared plus, remember this one's also A, so there's A squared, equal to, I'll just leave this as C. So we're going to solve for this side right here, which is C. A squared plus A squared is 2A squared equal to C squared. And I want to solve for C, I have to take a square root of both sides. So I could leave it as this, but I do know the square root of A squared is A, so I'm going to simplify it to A root 2 is equal to C. So this right here is A root 2. We do something similar to what we did the last time that we learned these in 30, 60, 90, so 45, 45, 90, I can fill in my A here and my A here. So if this is 45, 45, it's an isosceles triangle. Those two have to be congruent. And then my diagonal, my hypotenuse, is A root 2. Okay, when we did these, we learned kind of two different ways to think through it. Is you can either memorize this figure right here, okay, or we can start thinking through formulas. I guess we learned three. Start thinking through formulas here, and if I tell you that this is 10, for instance, you should be able to solve for the other leg just because it's equal. So one leg is equal to the other leg. Okay, I'll call it leg 1 and leg 2. Those are equal to each other. They're both A in this case. Okay, to get to that far side over there, this is going to be 10 root 2, because if this is 10, then this is 10 root 2. So you're going to take one of your legs times root 2, and you're going to get your hypotenuse. Now, if we need to work backwards with that exact same example, if I say that this is 10 root 2, what is this side? Well, if this is 10 root 2, the 10's in the place of the A, so this side is 10. And so what are you doing? You're taking 10 root 2 and you're dividing by root 2. Those root 2's cancel and you get 10. So your hypotenuse is equal to your leg. I did that wrong. Let's go back. Even in videos, sometimes we write things wrong, but I can say that my hypotenuse divided by root 2 is equal to my leg. So those are the only ways that you need to know it. Really, there's only one formula right there, and that's this one right here, and then in reverse. The other one, which some people liked, is that if you know one of your legs, so in the 30, 60, 90, we needed to know our short leg. Both of these are considered a short leg, okay? But if we know one of our legs, to get here, we just multiply by root 2, okay? And here you can say you multiply by 1, but they're the same thing. It usually makes it more confusing if I do that. So again, why is this in the similarity unit? It's because every 45, 45, 90 triangle is similar. So if we have our A, and our A root 2, okay, if this is 10, then this is 10, and then this is 10 root 2, for instance. If this is 30, this is 30 root 2, and this is 30. And if you check your ratios, 30 divided by 10 is 3, 30 divided by 10 is 3, 30 root 2 divided by 10 root 2 is 3. So all of the ratios are the same. Again, similar triangles, angle similarity that's going on, lots of different connections. So let's do some practice problems. I would suggest right now that you pause this video and that you go do these practice problems and then come back to it and check and see how you did. Okay, so I'm going to go through these practice problems now. Hopefully at this point you have done yours. You've paused the video and gone through them. So the first one that we have, we are given one of the legs. So remember, the easiest thing in this is that the two legs are the same. So this is 7. Make that easy on yourself. To go from one of the legs to the hypotenuse, you just multiply by root 2. So in this one, it's just simply 7 root 2. If I come over here, if I'm given one of the legs is 5 root 2, to go to the other leg, it's the same thing. So this is 5 root 2. My y would be 5 root 2. To go from the leg to the hypotenuse, I multiply by root 2. So we dealt with this last time that we taught, but 5 root 2 times root 2. What do? We get to multiply the things that are inside the roots together. So we get 5, and then we get a square root of 4. Now, something interesting comes up here because this square root of 4 right here should look very familiar. You know that the square root of 4 is 2, so now we have 5, 2. The question is, do we have 52? No, there's a multiplication sign understood in there, so there's a multiplication sign here. 5 times 2 is 10, so my x value is actually just 10. Okay, that's the simplification there. If we go on to letter C, again, my two legs are equal to each other, so this is 4. And then to get from my leg to my hypotenuse, I just multiply by root 2. And so this is 4 root 2. My letter D here, I've got my leg given to me as 7 root 2 over 2, and some of you are like, that's nasty. Well, this one is the exact same thing, 7 root 2 over 2. Don't make it more complicated. And then remember, to go from your leg to your hypotenuse, you multiply by root 2. So really what we have to ask ourselves is, how do we do this problem? Okay, and when you're dealing with fractions and multiplication, you want to have each one of them be a fraction. And you multiply your tops, you multiply your bottoms, and you simplify if you can. So 7 root 2 times root 2, very similar to the problem up here. You're going to get 7 root 4. You can multiply the 2's together. 2 times 1 on the bottom, you're going to get 2. The square root of 4 was 2, so on top we have 7 times 2. Bottom still 2 here. 7 times 2, if we keep going, is 14. On the bottom is 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So in all of that work, it simplified to just 7. Finish these up with these last few, and again, pause the video if you want to, if you're working on them one at a time. Now I'm given the hypotenuse and I need to work backwards. So I know that coming from here to here, I multiplied by root 2. So then we know that go from the hypotenuse to the leg, we're going to divide by root 2. So I'm going to take 5 and divide by root 2. Like I showed you guys in class, you don't have to simplify that anymore. That's my answer right there. And this happens to be the exact same thing. So as much as that seemed like it might be the hardest problem, it's actually the easiest problem there. Our last piece here in letter F, given the hypotenuse here, from our leg to our hypotenuse, we multiply by root 2. So I'm going to divide by root 2. So I'm going to take 3 root 3 and divide by root 2 here. Now, if this divided, I want to divide, it does not. So we're going to leave this as is, and that's just going to be 3 root 3 over root 2. If you're dealing with decimals, you find your decimal approximation here, which happens to be about 3.67. And if it's the same thing, then you're going to get 3.67 as well. For instance, in this one, you don't need to know how it goes, but this is 3 root 6 over 2, and you may see that written sometimes. These two are the same thing, so 3 root 3 over root 2 is our answer for B as well. So at this point, you should have everything that you need in order to complete the homework on page 31, which are all the 45, 45, 90s. Make sure you only use the rules I just taught you on 45, 45, 90 triangles. So you should be able to complete the homework on page 31.